fam, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I am going to be looking at some vintage bird books. So I saw some creators do this with other animals, but I thought it would be super interesting to do it with birds, just because a lot of the bird care we have now is very recent, like only in the past couple of decades. So I have 4 books here today, and I got these all off of Etsy. We're gonna be going from oldest to newest. The oldest book I have here is from 1930, and the newest one, which was finally printed in color, is from 1963. All right, so I'm gonna get into the first book. This is called Just Right Pet Foods, Canary and Pet Owner's Guidebook, and it covers care, feeding, and breeding of canaries, lovebirds, parrots, dogs, goldfish, and tropical fish, all in this 50-page booklet for only 10 cents. So I'm gonna skip the parts about dogs and goldfish, but when I first opened this book, the first thing that I see is this letter from the owner of the golden bird, which apparently was this famous singing canary. And I just looked it up, and apparently there's a recording of this canary singing on YouTube from an old record. That was actually really cool. Apparently this pet food company that they're advertising called Just Right was fed to this canary. So this first part's about canaries. I'm not gonna read too much into it because obviously I don't own canaries and I don't have experience with them, but it's still interesting to see. Well, okay, once a month, put a rusty nail or a Just Right iron tonic in drinking water. Well, we all know that that is the absolute worst idea and very toxic to birds. Should you get oil, salve, or grease on birds' feathers, wash off with soft cloth or cotton in warm water. Well, why would you get grease on the bird's feathers? Okay, so here's a really interesting part. This is Ailments and Diseases. Avian vets did not exist in 1930. The Association of Avian Veterinarians only was established in 1980, so people had to treat their sick birds at home, which I imagine was not very effective. It's very clear from this book that at this time we didn't know a thing about bird health and diseases. So here it says that a bird can suddenly fall from a perch and die in a few minutes, and that's caused from eating too much rich food. And now it says that the treatment for this is cut the nail of a big toe until it bleeds, then submerge bird in cold water several times and put it in a dry, warm place. Well, that sounds like a great way to not have an alive bird. And then it says for asthma, bird opens beak as if gasping for air, also takes short breaths with a rasping sound, puffs out feathers until it has the appearance of a ball, caused from neglected or severe cold. Well, that sounds like they're describing a respiratory infection, not asthma. And for treatment, it says chronic cases are almost incurable. For temporary relief, hang a small piece of raw smoked bacon sprinkled with cayenne pepper in the cage. It will help to clear the bird's throat. For a week or 2, feed only sweet rapeseed soaked in water and thoroughly dried. And then it says, don't let the bird bathe. At night, moisten end of toothpick, put it in sulfur, and then place toothpick on bird's tongue until sulfur adheres to tongue so the bird can swallow it. How did people even keep their birds alive at this time? I don't understand. Now for a cold, it says that bird sneezes and sits with feathers puffed up. If not attended to, will develop into asthma and consumption. Treatment, keep bird in warm room, free from drafts, dust, vapor, or tobacco smoke. Well, I think you should be doing that anyway. So birds cannot get the common cold. It is a virus that humans can get, but birds can't. So you cannot spread a cold to your bird if you get sick with one. When they say a cold, they're really describing most likely a bacterial or fungal respiratory infection. But I just looked up when antibiotics were first made, and penicillin was only discovered in 1928, and that was the first antibiotic. And this is from 1930, so at this point, you know, they weren't using anything for birds. So if a bird got an infection, they couldn't really be treated. Also continuing for the cold. To relieve bird, draw feather through nose holes, and 3 times a day apply borax dissolved in water to tongue. If bird will eat butter, pepper, or garlic, they will also offer relief. Well, we all know garlic is toxic to birds. Borax, yeah. Great idea, no. Consumption. Feathers appear ruffled, flesh dwindles and birds stop singing. Consumption usually originates from a neglected cold. For treatment, place rusty nail or just right iron tonic in drinking water. Also give bird 2 drops of cod liver oil for relief. Epileptic fits, caused from improper food, sudden fright, intense heat, direct rays of hot sun, and close confinement. Well, that's heat stroke. Treatment, sprinkle head with ice cold water. Give bird a few drops of olive oil when able to swallow it. Feed just right imported bird seed, vegetables, and fruit it may relish. Should bird show no improvement, bleed by making an incision just enough to draw blood in one hind claw of foot using sharp knife. This is horrible. So this is advertising for some remedies, I guess, for different bird illnesses by the Just Right company. So we got the iron tonic, bird bitters for colds, coughing, difficult breathing, bird jelly for birds suffering from asthma. We got Just Right bird wash, which will help keep birds free from lice, mites, and vermin. What else we have? Feather pulling remedy for all cage birds, guaranteed to stop feather pulling in parrots and canaries. All right, so enough with that section. On to the next section, and it's titled Lovebirds, and then it also says also known as shell parakeets and budgerigar. So apparently at this time they called budgies lovebirds. I wonder what they called real lovebirds. And they also spell parakeet with 2 R's instead of 1. So first it just has a little description of what a budgie is. And then it says, care. This can be passed over very quickly as they need so little. If you desire a pet, give him freedom of the house. You will find that he is very clean, needs no daily bath or other attention like a canary. It says that feeding is very simple. Their seed should be of the best, clean, sweet smelling, sound, and plump. Canary, millet, and hulled oats. Well, you know, pellets didn't exist at this time, so it's pretty much all they fed the birds. All seed diets were very standard during this time. And I guess it's just because people didn't know any better. And I didn't expect them to be feeding anything other than all seed diets. But the fact that they advertise that they need so little care and they literally don't need any care, I mean, I guess, you know, I'm expecting a little bit more than that. Give them a little whole wheat bread to pick at. Cuttlebone and gravel should be sprinkled on the bottom of the cage. So parrots don't need any kind of gravel or grit. If you don't already know, you know, parrots, they hull their seeds and they generally crack whatever food they're eating before swallowing it. They don't swallow their food whole like finches, canaries, pigeons, other types of birds like that. So they don't need any grit, and in fact, it can be very harmful for them. It can cause a crop impaction, so parrots should never have grit. And it says, a little apple or wild weeds can also be placed before them in season, but as a whole, they prefer their seed and may never touch anything else. All right, so training. To tame a lovebird, select one as young as possible. Keep him in a small cage by himself so that when you come near him, he cannot hide or get away from you. Well, that is called learned helplessness, and it's when a bird knows that, you know, when they learn over time that if they can't get away from you, and no matter what they do, that you're still going to be forcing them into doing whatever you want them to do, eventually they will stop trying to get away and they'll stop protesting. And that is not a bird that trusts you. It is not a bird that is tame. It is just a bird that has unfortunately given up all efforts because they've learned helplessness. So yeah, that is an absolutely horrible method of training, but it's the only thing we knew back then. And it says that if you're trying to teach the bird to talk, the bird must be kept by himself and near humans at all times. If permitted to associate with other birds, he will imitate them instead of his human teacher, which is not true. They can absolutely talk if you spend a lot of time with them, even if they have other birds, and budgies really should not be kept alone. They're extremely social. As you guys know, Pearl talks very well, so you don't need to keep them isolated from other birds. And it all depends on the individual. Many budgies will not talk. It's just based on whatever that individual bird chooses. So the Lovebird section is pretty short, and there is a section on parrots, which of course we know budgies are parrots, but there's a separate section titled parrots. It says at this time there were only about 7 species other than budgies offered to the public as follows: African gray parrot, the double yellow-headed Mexican parrot, well, we don't call them that today. The double yellow-headed Amazon parrot is what they are today. Mexican red-headed parrot, Mexican single yellow-headed parrot, Pine Island parrot, Panama parrot, and blue-fronted Amazon parrot. So this talks about parrots being wild-caught. At this time, all of these species were wild-caught except for budgies, and I think cockatiels were already established at this time. But it says here, parrots are gathered by men. These men have had years of experience. They hunt the parrots' nests in the jungles that are made in the hollows of the trees. They take the birds at about 3 or 4 weeks of age, just as they are about ready to leave the nest. They then hand raise them for a couple of weeks or more, feeding them with a spoon. An importation of wild-caught parrots to the US was only banned in 1991 with the Wild Bird Conservation Act, which is not that long ago if you think about it. And you know, some people do still have wild-caught parrots in their homes, the ones that are over 30 years old, but any bird that you can get now, if it's legal, it is, you know, captive bred. As for diet, baby parrots were fed cornmeal mush because they didn't have baby bird formula. And it says here, on arrival, put just right parrot food, an ideal mixture containing sunflower seed, hemp, cracked corn, polly crackers, peanuts, beech nuts, and pepper pods in seed cup. Refill it every day. Well, I guess we know where Pollyanna cracker came from, but parrots should not be eating crackers. So yeah, a very unhealthy mixture because we didn't know a thing about nutrition. And it says, remember, a parrot has a gizzard and they must have sharp gravel to grind their food. Just right silver bird gravel is especially prepared for parrots. So yeah, that's totally wrong because parrots don't swallow their food whole. They don't need any kind of grit or gravel, and they should never have any kind of grit or gravel. And once again, the Just Right company is advertising one of their products. The Just Right Parrot Tonic for sick parrots has 100% satisfactory results by taking polly crackers or ordinary soda crackers and putting them in an oven and pouring the tonic over each cracker. And this gives immediate relief to parrots suffering from asthma, hoarseness, colds, loss of appetite, and bleeding bowels. And there it is, the Just Right Parrot Tonic will cure your bird of any sickness. All right, so that's gonna be it for this book because that's all the bird sections in here. The rest is about dogs and fish. All right, so this next book is called Talking Parakeets, Complete Manual on Their Care, Training, and Breeding. And it was published in 1951. This cover is so cute. And hopefully there's gonna be an improvement from 1930 to 1951. Of course, it's called Talking Parakeets, but not all budgies will talk, of course. So it's not a great thing to market them as talking parakeets. And this one does have photos. This is so cute. It gets into the history of budgies, which budgies have been in captivity for longer than most other parrots. About the middle of the 19th century, between 1840 and 1850, the first parakeets were brought to Europe from Australia. From a small start, imports soon ran into the thousands. England took these lovable budgies from the land of their down-under brethren to heart, and soon breeding establishments were founded throughout the land. And then it just gets into a description of what a budgie is and what they look like. And then we have another photo of, in black and white, of a little young budgie on a child's doll. And that's what their toys looked like at the time. And it says, undoubtedly, the greatest single cause for the tremendously increased interest in parakeets these last few years was the recognition by the public of their ability to talk. So yeah, I mean, budgies can be great talkers, but many of them won't. It's not a good thing to get a bird just because some of that species can talk, because very easily the one you get might not talk. And then there's this cute picture. It's the same one as on the cover, and you can see the 50s hair and makeup. Okay, so the taming section of this book is already a lot improved from the last one. It says, it's a good idea to give your budgie a few days time to settle down into his new cage. Remember, at all times be gentle, do not make sudden or quick movements, and above all, talk to him in a kindly, soft-spoken manner. At first, take a perch or round stick, and while talking softly, work the perch into the cage. He will soon become accustomed to this and will perch on it. So yeah, I mean, using a stick instead of your hand at first is actually a good taming method. As long as they're not like shoving the stick into the bird to get them to step up. The stick training is actually a very good taming method if your bird is scared of hands. Reach your finger into the cage slowly and gradually until he is no longer frightened at its presence. You may stroke his head or breast, and in a very short time, he should be ready to perch on your finger. Reward him with a delicacy, a treat food or tidbit he particularly likes. If you find he still will not go on your finger, gently press it against the lower breast or legs, and when he understands he won't be hurt, he will climb onto your finger voluntarily. So like they're getting into already like giving your bird treats for positive association, and you know, they at least say slowly and gradually until they're no longer frightened, and you know, that's all good. I mean, the only thing that is a little problematic there is pressing your finger onto the bird's chest to get them to step up. That is still a method of forcing, but it's so much better than the last book still. And then they just talk about taking your bird out of the cage. And I'm actually really impressed with this. This author is already against wing clipping. It says, some bird fanciers believe it best to clip the wings of a parakeet before taming. This is done by cutting or pulling about half of the long flight feathers of each wing. Since it requires such little work, I believe it is just as well to tame a parakeet without these artificial means and apply the method described in the beginning of this chapter. So this person already recognizes that you don't need to clip the wings to tame a bird, and I'm really seeing a lot more improvement in this book from the last already. And then it talks about teaching them to talk, and I'm gonna skip that part. But then it talks about feeding. So at this time, pellets also didn't exist yet. It says nothing is more important to his well-being than fresh, nourishing seeds, properly cleaned and dust-free. So I didn't really expect them to be shifting away from seed diets yet, because at this time, pellets didn't exist. I don't think they really even knew that vegetables were necessary either. It says, the ideal daily food contains a mixture of canary seeds, white millet, and smaller quantities of other millet strains. Keep your budgie's seed cup filled at all times. And then it gets back to grit. It says, parakeets require a good grade of coarse gravel. Keep an ample supply on the bottom of the cage or in a separate dish at all times. So yeah, we know now parrots don't need grit, but at the time they thought that all birds need grit. And at the first sign of looseness in a bird's droppings, discontinue the greens at once. So this is definitely wrong. Yes, sometimes when birds eat a lot of vegetables, their droppings will get more watery, but this isn't an issue. It's just droppings change based on what a bird is eating at the time, and the droppings will return to normal. And then there's another photo of a budgie on a child's toy. And then we get to the general care section. It is remarkable how little time need be spent in caring for a parakeet pet. True, it must be done regularly, but it is amazing how little actual time and effort need to be expended in return for such great pleasure. Well, that's definitely not true, very misleading. because budgies, like any other parrot, have very high demanding care needs, definitely require a great deal of time and effort. And it says most any average sized canary cage is suitable for housing parakeets. And I assume that means either a round cage, maybe even a round hanging cage, or just a small tabletop cage, which of course now we don't consider suitable anymore. And then for illness and disease, it says, for the purpose of this book, we list a few of the occasional ailments with suggested treatments: colds, asthma, bronchitis, and pneumonia. These all get their start from the first mentioned colds. So yeah, birds cannot get a cold. They can get respiratory infections, but it's not going to be the common cold virus. It is bacterial or fungal. Parakeets can stand fairly cold temperatures, but drafts and sudden pronounced changes of temperature will cause colds. It is true that sudden changes of temperature can weaken a bird's immune system and make them more susceptible to getting an infection. And then for diarrhea, it says remove all green foods immediately. Keep the bird in a warm location. Some people advise boiled milk or plain buttermilk in place of regular drinking water. So birds are lactose intolerant, so that's just gonna make it worse. Vegetables are completely fine if they cause watery droppings. It is not an issue. And then it just talks about mites. And then it gets into breeding, which I am not a breeder and I am not experienced with breeding, so I'm just gonna go ahead and skip that part. Pictures. There's just some advertisement for bird food brands. These are all seeds. There's one of these seed bells, like one of those, which are not good, but that's all they had at the time. Now, lastly, we have this book about cockatiels from 1963, and there is a picture of a lutino cockatiel in the front. The first cockatiel mutation is the pied, and it was first bred in 1949. So cockatiel mutations were still pretty new at the time. And inside, on the inside cover, we have this picture in black and white. And then we have another picture here of a cockatiel sticking its head between the bars of this round cage with an Amazon parrot in it, which of course is really dangerous and not safe. They can easily get their head stuck in bar spacing that is too wide. Not to mention, the Amazon parrot could easily bite the cockatiel through those bars, so that is not smart at all. But let's take a look at how the cockatiel care is in 1963. So like most of these books, it starts off with just a description of cockatiels as pets. And it says just a few of their many fine pet qualities are: they are hardy and easily kept, they are one of the cleanest cage birds available, they require a minimum of time and expense, they are easy to tame, teach to whistle and talk and to do tricks, and they make an attractive and colorful conversation piece and decorator item in any house. Modern and beautiful cages are available in which to house them. I don't like that at all. I don't like that. Treating birds as decorations, very bad, and they definitely don't require a minimum of time and expense. And it says they are quite long-lived, the average lifespan between 10 to 14 years, which today a cockatiel lives a lot longer than that. They can live to be 20 or even more, even 25 years. So diet and proper care these days does make a big difference on their lifespan. And then there's a picture of a cockatiel with a half-moon conure. And then there's some more pictures. There's this little cockatiel. And then you can see how small the cages were at this time. That's a very tiny cage for 3 cockatiels. And then there's this picture of 2 cockatiels on a play stand with a little Budgie in the center. And then it talks about mutations and how to tell a cockatiel's sex. And another picture. There's quite a lot of pictures in this book. And then it gets into housing your cockatiel, and you can just see how tiny this cage is. I haven't seen any other pictures of the cages they're keeping the birds in the other books, but yeah, you can just see in comparison to that cockatiel, that is a very tiny cage. And it says a large parakeet cage is sufficient if you leave the cage door open and allow him daily flights. So I guess maybe this is what they consider a parakeet cage. and all parrots, regardless if they're in a flight cage, should be allowed out of their cage for at least several hours a day. And I like how many pictures there are in this book. Here's another one of the play gym with the cockatiels and the Budgie. So now for diet and feeding. It says that the basic daily diet for cockatiels is parakeet seed, oats, and sunflower seed. So yeah, that's pretty much as expected, the same as in all the other books, but at least it's not Polly crackers. But it does include, as an addition to a well-balanced diet, lettuce, carrot, or apple should be fed twice a week, and a small cup of parakeet treat or millet spray may be kept in the cage, a cuttle bone for calcium. So, I mean, twice a week, and you know, just lettuce, apple, and carrot, that's definitely nothing close to what we have now for our birds in terms of fresh foods, but it's a start. But just like all the other books, this book also says that grit is absolutely necessary to the bird's health. In effect, the grit serves the purpose of grinding up the cockatiel's food, as the bird has no teeth. And there's even a picture of grit. So this book does talk about wing clipping and does promote wing clipping. It says that the writer believes it expedites the taming period to clip the wing feathers. Not only will the bird be easier to handle, but in his first flight, when you let him out for exercise, he will be less likely to injure himself by flying into walls and mirrors. Yeah, so clipping is definitely something that was very common at this time. This book really shows clipping in detail. It has picture of a cockatiel getting clipped, and I mean, this is a very, very severe clipping. Like, they're clipping all the secondary flight feathers, not just the primaries. You see they clipped all of this, and they started all the way here, which, I mean, even today, people that do still clip birds' wings, they don't clip that much. They usually will only clip the first 5 primaries. And I don't think any clipping is good at all, but this is just an especially severe clipping. And it says, this photo shows how much of the wing feathers must be clipped to hinder the cockatiel's flying ability, which is not true at all. I mean, cockatiels with just the primary feathers clipped also don't have much flying ability at all. And the thing is, this kind of clipping is outright dangerous to your bird. I mean, this is beyond just making them unable to fly. This is making it so even when they attempt to fly, when they jump off a perch, they're going to be falling straight to the ground like a rock, and they can injure themselves. They can break their keel bone. The shorter you clip, the less active your bird will be in the air. When he learns that he cannot fly, he will be less likely to try and escape from you. This is a good time to let him ride on your shoulder. So yeah, that is learned helplessness. That is when the bird learns that no matter how hard they try, they cannot escape from you even if they're terrified of you. And they learn to stop resisting and to stop trying to get away. And that is not trust. That is not a true bond with your bird. And it says, by the time the clipped wing feathers have grown out, your bird should be sufficiently tamed to allow him free flight when you choose. However, there may be certain high places in your home where you will not want him to perch, and therefore you will want him somewhat limited in his flight. The restriction of flight may be accomplished by pulling out the same wing feathers that were clipped. And it says that wing plucking does not hurt your bird, which is completely untrue. Plucking the feathers out of the wing is physically painful for them. All right, well, so there's some really pretty bad advice here. It says, there are instances where a bird has been so abused and mistreated that he will grab your fingers and hold on in a painful pinch. If you find yourself in possession of such a bird, wear gloves. When the bird grasps you viciously, hold him under a cold water tap until he releases his bite. Repeat this again and again until you can extend your hand and he does not grab for you. Again, learned helplessness. That is one way to make your bird completely scared of you. Birds will bite out of fear, and by doing this, you're just making them have even more fear. And then there's some more pictures. I think this is the author, because in all the pictures, it's the same person. And again, this very tiny cage with the cockatiels. All right, guys, so that was bird care from 1930 to 1963. I am so glad that we know so much more about birds now, and we can give them the best lives possible, and I'm sure we're going to keep improving as time goes on with new standards of care. I'm really glad we are not living in that time right now with our birds. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed and found this interesting. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, follow me on Instagram and TikTok, check out my website, elleandthebirds.com for my kids, and I will see you guys in my next video.